This is all still speculative. The Taiwanese media outlets, who are obviously speaking to Taiwanese military sources, they seem to think that the plan is she will be flying into Taipei on Tuesday night. Unless she announces something a bit later in the evening in Singapore, I would expect it would be an unannounced visit, given the sensitivity of it. Certainly, ahead of this visit, she didn't rule out the possibility of adding additional stops compared to the four countries, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan and South Korea. And clearly, you have to fly north somewhere in the vicinity of Taiwan to reach South Korea and Japan. So speculation is rife that Tuesday night will be when she arrives.
Yeah. China, of course, has already made its displeasure clear, most recently in a conversation with Joe Biden, but another warning this afternoon. What have they said?
Yeah, the Chinese government has said that the People's Liberation Army will not sit idly by. And when asked what sort of strong countermeasures China is promising, the spokesman Zhao Lijian said, "If Pelosi dares to come, let us see." Now, analysts are pretty much of the view that there could be some bluster involved. The Chinese government does have a record, or the military has a record of talking tough. But on the other hand, if you read Chinese media, they are setting the expectations so high that the Chinese military will in one way or another implement countermeasures, particularly with the fanning of the flames of nationalism in recent years by Xi Jinping's government. It's hard to imagine that a few military drills will suffice. This is why I suppose the Biden White House and the American military were so worried about this visit, because domestically in China, the expectations of the Chinese government doing something unprecedented, or the Chinese military doing something unprecedented, are really high. So no clarity today from Beijing about what that could involve. But we already have seen the Chinese military abruptly announce 5 separate live firing drills, including in the South China Sea, where there is a US carrier group currently active. So could be a bit of friction tomorrow if this visit does go ahead.
And how serious is the risk of any military confrontation?
Well, it comes down to how seriously you take the words of the Chinese military, of the Chinese government. You have spokespeople in Beijing saying that there will be firm countermeasures. And as I said, the Chinese military is under huge domestic pressure to look tough. Now, Xi Jinping personally, he's a few months away from very likely cementing a third term in power. But to do that, he needs the internal support not just of the Communist Party leadership, but also of the Chinese military. Now, everybody assumes from the signals we've been seeing out of China in the last couple of years that Xi Jinping is well and truly on track to secure that additional term in power. But it's highly likely in a party and military as large as China's that there would be some discontent about his power grab. And so some analysts believe at this particular point, particularly with China's economy also growing quite slowly, that it's not a good time for Xi Jinping to look weak. And it is quite personally insulting to him, after spending a decade at the helm, really claiming that he is the great protector of the Chinese nation, that he is building up China's military strength, to then have the woman who is third in line to the US presidency turning up to Taiwan in defiance of his warnings.
Yeah. Well, you know, the US has made their feelings about Taiwan very clear. So why, though, is this visit driving this nationalistic fervour in Beijing?
Well, Bev, the thing is, had it happened in April like originally planned, it probably would have gone off without a hitch, because back then it was only leaked to the media or announced a few days in advance. Nancy Pelosi ended up testing positive for COVID while in Japan, so it didn't happen. But back then, China's government was a lot more measured in the language it was using. Now, what's the difference between April and August, where we now are? Well, Joe Biden, you remember when he was up in Tokyo, he was asked once again, would the United States intervene in a conflict over Taiwan? And for the third time, he answered yes. So I think earlier on this year, the Chinese government was still feeling out the Biden administration's policy towards Taiwan. There now might be a view that actually the Biden administration is pretty tough and willing to continue supporting Taiwan militarily and politically. Now, Nancy Pelosi, I might add, is not part of the administration. Technically, Joe Biden has no control over this trip, but she's obviously a Democratic Party stablemate, and certainly I think the way Beijing will view it, they will see this as part of a concerted effort by Washington to build closer, deeper ties with the Taiwanese government.